Good morning. Happy Tuesday. It is a great day. I had to come in to the purple room for a little bit today, so I thought I would just shoot the video from here. So I brought the travel edition of Neuro Coffee, and it is perfect. So I've been going back and forth on email with Eddie from Germany. Eddie's an osteopath in Germany. And we've been discussing how we would utilize half kneeling positions or split stance positions and how it would affect the orientation and behavior of the pelvis. So I thought I would shoot a video and sort of break down the half kneeling position a little bit more in detail than what we've been used to. And hopefully it'll answer some questions that you may have as to how you're going to implement this in half kneeling or split stance activities to achieve the outcomes that you've been seeking. So I have my pelvis set up here on the stool in sort of a split stance orientation or half kneeling orientation, so we can manipulate it a little bit easier and show you some of the positions that are very common in regards to execution of certain activities in half kneeling or split stance, or some of the things that you're going to see in your athletes or clients. And one of the most common things you're probably going to see is you're going to see people assume this half kneeling or split stance orientation with one hip higher than the other. And what I want you to recognize is that what you're typically seeing under these circumstances is that the pelvis is actually going to be oriented towards the downside leg, but it's also going to be positioned in a position of inhalation. So you're going to get external rotation of both ilia, and you're going to get counter nutation of the sacrum. Now, what this does is it creates a descension of the pelvic diaphragm. So this is a very low pressure situation inside the pelvic diaphragm, which pushes some of the effort towards the extremity musculature, which is one of the reasons why you'll see people complain of quad tightness in a split stance or half kneeling position, or they'll complain about tightness in the front of the hip, or they'll complain about anterior knee pain, because they're placing more demand on the extremity musculature. This increases pressure and tension at the joints, and so that might be what they're actually sensing. If we want to create a more stable structure through the pelvis, we have to create a concentrically oriented pelvic diaphragm. So we need an overcoming contraction and concentric orientation of that pelvic diaphragm. And the way we do that is by leveling the pelvis actively. So for those people that are presenting with that one hip higher than the other, so they're in external rotation, what we need to do is actually push the front side hip downward. In doing so, we actually create an internal rotation of that front side hip, which moves the ilium into internal rotation, which immediately nutates the sacrum and starts to bring the pelvic diaphragm upward towards concentric orientation. As I push this side down, I pick up activity on the inside of the downside thigh, which actually opens the outlet on this side, which also promotes a concentric pelvic diaphragm. So now I have a much more stable structure that I can perform my half kneeling exercises in, or my split stance activities. And this should happen as I move actively through a split stance, or as I assume a stable position in half kneeling. Once again, for those people that cannot create this concentric orientation or this propulsive phase in half kneeling or in split stance, they will typically complain about tightness or pressure or pain. Now, if I take us to more of a side view, you can see that I probably have this potential orientation issue to deal with as well. If I have an anteriorly oriented pelvis, I have lost the relative motion, and therefore I have no relative position change capabilities. To overcome the anterior orientation, I have to use the proximal hip musculature to capture the position of the ischial tuberosity relative to the femur. If I can capture this position, then I can restore the relative position change that's necessary for me to capture the concentric pelvic diaphragm. This is going to allow me to be stable and comfortable in half kneeling, or allow me to propel through my split squat. So let's take a look at these positions in half kneeling. So as I am resting here on my left knee, I can actually feel that my right hip is now higher. So that's going to be that inhaled position. So both sides of my pelvis are actually in an inhaled position, and both hips are in ER. So for me to capture an IR position of the hip and a concentrically oriented pelvic diaphragm, what I want to do is I want to cue a downward position with this hip. So I'm not sagging into the hip, I'm physically pushing it down. So think about pulling up with abdominals on the left side and pushing the right hip down. Now what I've done is I've oriented the acetabulum so they're now both facing forward into an anteverted position, which captures internal rotation on both hips. Now, here's the kicker. I have to make sure that I'm maintaining the position of the ischial tuberosity relative to the femur first. If I don't do that, I don't get this relative position change and I can't capture the IRs. I'll stay in ER, and those are the people that are going to complain about tightness in the front of the hip, tightness in the quad, or knee pain on either knee. This is one of the reasons why this half kneeling position is so important, is because it's going to transfer to all of my split stance activities. If I cannot capture the maximum propulsive position in half kneeling, the chances of me capturing in a split stance are minimal. Keep in mind, there are some clients that are not qualified to be in half kneeling, nor are they qualified for split stance activities. Your goal under those circumstances are to recapture the intentional anterior and posterior orientation of the pelvis. This assures that I can maintain position of the ischial tuberosity relative to the femur, which gives me the capacity to restore relative positions within the pelvis.